Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Sundukwe Onoha.
I'm Chatawanze. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are.
Wherever you are. And as we've said before, we just want to say a huge thank you to our listeners from all over the world. It's just it's very endearing or very good, to get messages from people saying that they're listening to us from XY place. And so just want to say thank you.
So thank you for listening. I mean, I like seeing the messages, the words of encouragement. Mhm. Well
Uh
done.
right. Okay, so it was quite a rather interesting weekend. And
Weekend, I
I
be week.
oh, a week, but it culminated on Friday, didn't it? But and the thing is, I have this sneaky feeling that if there was ever an episode or if there was ever a topic that Cheta will cherish more than any, it would be this.
Actually, no, but go on.
Okay, so for someone who continues to remind me that I'm a member of the Labour Party and
But you are a
all that.
member of the Labour
Yeah,
Party.
I know. So it's quite interesting that you're not cherishing this. But without
And
much,
you are sitting on -44 approval rating,
you
net
see,
approval rating.
now you see, he might say he's not, but I think he is.
I
But
am
anyway,
not cherishing it.
Cheta,
Yes.
what's the news? Or just to set the scene anyway. So
It's your party. Tell me what's
in
happening.
August 2020, in May 2025, Angela Rayner purchased a flat in Hove for
Who is
around
Angela Rayner?
£800,000, and paid approximately £30,000 in stamp duty. Now, for those who do not know her, Angela Rayner was the deputy prime minister and um, the deputy leader of the Labour Party. She's someone who's been praised. Of course, she's a member of parliament, and she's someone
Still
who's
a
been
member of
praised.
parliament.
Yeah, I said she is. Yeah, I said she's a member of parliament. There's someone who's been praised for her being more or less like the ordinary person. Now, in a time where members of parliament are these people who one might argue rather polished, are very deliberate in how they talk, in how they dress, in how they appear, even in their education. And Delrina stands out from the rest. She was a single mother. She got pregnant at 16, raised in a council estate, didn't go to uni. She's the quintessential left of the political space, if ever there was any. And she's the one person who just had that every person appearance. And sadly, she got herself embroiled into this mess. And there are many people uh, who saw her as a formidable political opponent who would be happy to see her go. So after buying that flat in May and paying about £30,000 in stamp duty in August, the media ran a
I think it's important to state which media.
okay.
It started with the Telegraph and then the Daily Mail tacked on.
Yes,
And for those who may not know, these are right-wing papers in the UK.
yes.
So it
So
was
the
largely
right.
the right-wing media tacked on to the fact that, and it all began with a very accidental. She was during the summer. She was taking a photo of her was taken on the beach in Hove, and while a lot of people felt that she was just enjoying, in short, when the photo first came out, people were like, oh, wow, she's enjoying a vacation in the country. But it gave somebody in one of those newspapers, I forget his name, an opportunity to start snooping. And he found that she had purchased a house, I think a month or so before that picture came out. Now,
So
yeah,
as I said, they ran a story to show that having purchased that house, she underpaid to the by her stamp duty to the tune of £40,000. That, if anything, was setting oneself up, because as Chacha had mentioned earlier, the media, especially the a lot of the national media in the UK is right wing, and they've had it in for not just the Labour government but Angela Rayner, because many saw her as an attack, as a formidable attack person when it comes to just taking on the right.
Not just
So
that, she's also she's. I mean, so with Kerstama, for example, Kerstama really does not have. He's not really ideological. He doesn't have some where he stands. He would spin anything. Angela Rayner was clearly to the left. So she's an ideological foe. I think it's important to point out that this is not the first time that the right-wing media is going after her. So, for example, in 2022, and I remember this very clearly because I watched this when Boris Johnson was still Prime Minister. There was a report in the Mail that in the Daily Mail where they alleged that during a House of Commons sitting that she was crossing and uncrossing her legs and that she was not wearing any underwear. So that you've of course for those of a certain vintage, you may remember the movie Basic Instinct. I don't. Have you seen Basic Instinct, Sharon Stone?
I think if you are age and you've not seen Basic Instinct, it's quite interesting, because I think almost everyone, for that one scene,
So the in sometime in 2022, sorry, I was saying 2002, sometime in 2022, the Daily Mail actually ran an article alleging that she did that thing to Boris Johnson during a House of Commons sitting, and that as a result he was distracted and could not deliver. He could not deliver a speech that he was giving, and I found that very wildly interesting, especially given that Boris Johnson and women is not exactly he's not exactly the most disciplined when it comes to woman matter.
no,
So
but it's quite interesting that they picked on that. And I think people immediately tore it apart at
yes,
just
people
it
tore it
being
apart,
the
but
Daily Mail being the Daily Mail. Because if you've seen, even from someone who sorry, Chidera, but even for someone who watches this from TV, the table or the desk or whatever you call it in the middle, dividing the two aisles. Now he would have to be maybe 10 feet tall, 11 feet tall, peering down to be able to see between someone's legs from one end of the chamber to the. It's nonsense the way this woman has been hounded by the right wing media, especially.
yes, but it
It's
just
silly.
so I think for me fundamentally, because this was I think this was the third time that they went after her.
I mean, there
There
was
was
the thing about her dancing in Ibiza, the thing about her vaping. Everything she does was, fresh
the
meat, as it were, for the Daily Mail.
exactly given that. So I think this where she let herself down was the fact that knowing that you have this very vicious set of people and they're after you. You need at that point you need to be squeaky clean. I mean, at the end of the day, you are not an African leader, so you don't have the luxury of sitting down and saying no, I will not resign. It's it just got so she, especially given that Keir Starmer had started his government by saying he would return ethics. What was this phrase that he used that you people um have not been so clear on? Nzukwe, remind us now.
Now, look, you're making the accusation. You tell me, I'm not in your mind, so I don't know what you're about to say.
Okay. Anyway, Keir Starmer promised that he will run a clean government. So it was clear that that's the moment Angela Rayner referred herself to the ethics advisor and he wrote that report, it was clear that she had to go. But personally, I think that she will be back. I think that she'll be back. In what capacity, I can't say. But at the end of the day, you can't. Everything I have read about her indicates that she's a very formidable political operative. So such people, when you think of people like, is it Mandelson?
Peter
That's
Mandelson.
that's left and came back twice in previous governments. There are
Uh,
people who
and then it's now, the
is
the
the
UK's.
ambassador to the US. There are certain people who, because of their their political abilities. They are basically oracles. They are not going to be. You are not going to get rid of them that easy. And I think she happens to fall into that category.
And perhaps I should have started by declaring my interest in saying I've always been an Angela Rayner fanboy for the fact that Angela Rayner is she comes across as your neighbor down the road because she's just that person, you know. So
Because she's working class, and she's from the lower end of the working class. To put it, she's somebody. Let's put it like this, and this is one of the reasons why, aside from the fact that she's a proper unionist, which is one of the reasons why the right wing really detest her. Then she's clearly not posh. She's clearly
mm,
from the wrong part of town, as it
mm,
were. So that is so there were so many things that's about her that they would not like. And I mean that's that. I always like to, at the risk of, because we have to talk about all the other reshufflings
mm,
where your expertise being in the Labour Party, you would do a lot of talking about who is who. But I always like to compare whenever I hear a story of resignation, especially in Europe, and it's for something seemingly innocuous, conflict of interest, all of that stuff. I always remember a 1998 interview that Ignatius Oluseemeka, who was one of those premier Nigerian diplomats back in the day, had on Hard Talk with St. Sebastian. The when Hard Talk was still Hard Talk, and Tim Sebastian asked him something along the lines of, "You all knew that Abacha was really bad. Were you not ashamed of what was happening in Nigeria while you were serving Abacha?" And Olusegun said, "Yes, we were concerned." And Tim Sebastian asked him, "So why didn't you resign?" And I will never forget the way Mr. Olusegun sat back in his chair, relaxed, and then said, "Well, Tim, resignation is a British tradition."
and in where when you think about it, indeed it is because you can think about, especially now, a few of the mishaps that have happened in the U.S. under Trump, especially with the government, high level government appointees chatting about war plans over an open messaging channel. And
A wicked person said that America is Nigeria that has money.
look, at this point, it is. And sadly, I'm sorry to segue, but I think for me, what makes me even depressed about what's going on in America is that before, and I think we mentioned this before you would have someone to whom we would run to caution our political leaders. But when the American institution is acting like the final boss of the Nigerian system, who on earth you go to? And so that means whatever is going on in America spells doom, at least for political uh, events and political uh, restraint in Nigeria. But anyway, we digress. So, what happened when Angela Rayner resigned was that suddenly the government had a choice. We can choose a new uh, deputy prime minister, but also a new secretary of state for how now. In fact, that's even something that we didn't mention. One of
She
the
was
things that
Secretary of State for
is for
Housing.
housing, which was even more damaging to see that a secretary for housing who should have known that these are the implications for underpaying tax on your home, whether it was registered as your first or second home, which was part of the conversation around why she underpaid that tax. You would have known that, look, there's going to be a problem. But, Kestama, who was the prime minister, didn't just stop at replacing that or feeling that the position that Angela Rayner had left. He had a reshuffle. And I think if you look at the context of our podcast and the people to whom we speak, that has an even bigger um, implication than just replacing the position left by Angela Rayner. So, in the reshuffle, David Lammy moved from the Foreign Office. He was Secretary of State for international affairs, or as we call it, the foreign
Foreign
secretary.
secretary.
He was a foreign secretary, but then he moved from being foreign secretary to being justice secretary. Shabana Mahmood
And he was made
moved,
deputy prime minister.
and he was made deputy prime minister, and we'll probably get to that as well. The Shabana Mahmood was appointed as home secretary, while Yvette Cooper moved from being home secretary to being foreign secretary, which was in itself quite interesting.
So, so I want to jump in here um very, very briefly, because
mm,
Shabana Mahmood, um, from what I've read about her, and I will raise my hand and say I didn't know much about her until recently. I'd started hearing her name here and there, but I didn't until she was appointed as Home Secretary before I actually sat down to read up on her. She's the daughter of immigrants. And I noticed very, very quickly that the right wing, and like I've told you before, I follow all of them. The right wing seized up on the fact that she's a Muslim.
yep.
They began to shout that Keir Starmer. They began to bring out that trope from J.D. Vance from some months ago that the UK is an Islamist country, so that the UK will be the first Islamist country with nuclear weapons. Um, so I think it's a way of putting her on the back foot with respect to immigration, because in my view, Yvette Cooper didn't do a very good job. She was dancing to the beat of reform. And I think that's what the right wing were doing with their attacks on Shabana Mahmood, was to try to put her again on the back foot and probably keep control of the narrative. Um, I think it's also important to point out that for the first time in UK history, three of the four great offices of state, the four great offices of state being the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Foreign Minister, and the Home Secretary, and the Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary are women. Three of those four are women. That's Rachel Reeves, Yvette Cooper, and Shabana Mahmood. Then, of course, Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister. But let me ask you a question. David Lammy, was he demoted?
Brief answer: yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, because if the being foreign secretary has always felt, or almost looked like being the real deputy prime minister, as it were.
Yeah, I
Because
mean, deputy prime minister is a fairly recent position.
yeah,
For example, Tony Blair did not have a deputy prime minister.
mm. And so when I saw that, and when, as you can imagine, we're in a few group chats, and someone was like, "Oh, but he's been made deputy PM." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, but what is that?" It's almost like when you look at the Nigerian context, for instance, where you have the president, you have the vice president, but you know that the chief of staff is the real second in command, or for your governors as well. You have the governor, you have the deputy governor. Everyone and their dog knows that um, if you're looking for who's the real power broker, is the number one, and then that shadowy figure in the back who is the first to see uh, the top person and the last to see the top person every single day. So for me, this came across as a demotion, but it was also not a big surprise, because ever since it was muted that David Lammy would be foreign secretary, the right wing press yet again went into overdrive. Um, Talking about his being unqualified for the position, uh, again referring to his ethnicity, referring to all the silly and lazy tropes that people who are from either black or brown minority ethnic groups have been subjected to. And this just seemed to me, and it was quite interesting again, because at the same time David Lammy was being attacked for being a black man in such a powerful position, Peter Mandelson was also briefly being attacked for having said something against Donald Trump before he was made the UK's ambassador to the US. However, surprise, surprise, Mandelson gets appointed, and this was all before the appointment. Mandelson gets appointed. All that noise stops. David Lammy, the noise keeps
They
going.
started referring to that and asking him whether he would apologize for things like that. I
Y-
remember some of those
Yeah,
interviews. I need to correct myself on something. When I said a few minutes ago that Tony Blair did not have a deputy prime minister, no, it was Gordon Brown who did not have a deputy prime minister.
mm.
Tony Blair's deputy prime minister was a chap called is it Michael Prescott or John Prescott?
John Prescott,
John Prescott, yeah.
the man with the mean hook.
Well, he was the deputy prime minister to Tony Blair.
And thinking about John Prescott, I'm sorry, I don't know how that jumped over me. I didn't even just jump in there to say John Prescott. Thinking about John Prescott, he's the one person that people have looked at Angela Rayner and said
Exactly.
if there was ever a worthy um
Successor.
successor to John Prescott, it was Angela, because she spoke the language of the common person.
They basically had similar backgrounds from the Midlands. Okay, John Prescott was from Hull. That's one I remember because I lived in Hull for just under a year. John Prescott was from Hull. Angela Rayner, of course, is from Manchester, but to the untrained ears like ours, it's the same accent.
Mm.
Um, from not very from backgrounds of not too much means, basically worked their way up through the unions and that kind of stuff. And both of them deputy prime minister to a prime minister who, even though he's in the Labour Party, he has right-wing tendencies.
Okay. Do you know? So yeah, I think we'll finish this conversation around David Lammy, and then we'll take a quick break. But I think I was, if anything, I was more upset, and even more upset at the attempt by the press to couch this demotion as an elevation of sorts. But I don't know if that's just me.
I think it's just you, because most people, even young Brits, uh, would look at the position of deputy prime minister. So I think that's something that is kind of increasingly missing. Explaining intricacies. So, as an example, before Margaret Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher's deputy prime minister died recently, Michael Heseltine. Is it Heseltine? Um, Please correct me if I mispronounce the name. But
Well,
before
yeah, looking
him,
for me for pronunciations of these names. For carry on.
you're a British politician. Before Heseltine, um, the position of deputy prime minister was vacant for, I think, about 50 years. Before that, the last deputy prime minister before that was Clement Attlee, who was deputy prime minister to Churchill during the war, because of they needed to do a coalition and all of that good stuff. The position has historically not been that important. Um, I think, but one thing that's and I'm a bit embarrassed to bring this up, but I agreed with him. Jacob Rees-Mogg, during the last election, after the last election, he said something after the election, when he was interviewed. He said the office of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is becoming more presidential. It's slowly beginning to try to assume a form that looks, at least in form, if not necessarily in substance, like the American president. So you would find that with that in mind, they will be getting a lot of they'll be getting deputy prime ministers um, uh, as a matter of course now. Think about it. Ever since Boris Johnson, they've always had a deputy prime minister. Um, which before that, you had David Cameron had a deputy prime minister because of the fact that it was a coalition government. But what's her name? Theresa May did not have. Then Boris Johnson came, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and then now Starmer. I think that position has now been baked in. What is interesting is that the Labour Party does not have a deputy leader. Um, uh, it doesn't have a deputy leader yet. you people are going to have to vote for a deputy leader during your party conference. When is
In,
it safe?
in fact, it's on the 28th of September to the 1st of October. And in fact,
You they go.
the timetable has just been announced for the election of the deputy, how long it would take and what will happen. Because first of all, you would need 40% of MPs to back you. You would need backing from regions, what you call the Constituency Labour Party. You would need the trade unions, and you would need members. So it's going to take a long process. And one of the biggest issues from this Angela Rayner's resignation is that at a time when the polling shows that Labour is at a dismal low, we're about to see, well,
You guys are not doing well in the polling at all.
yeah, and to have an election and the way elections go, where everyone throws caution to the wind and starts slagging off each other, sadly, you might see a situation where a party that is already doing bad in the polls will see people tear itself apart for the what will eventually be called an honor of being the deputy leader of the party. It is going to be quite
So
interesting.
I want to throw in something slightly different. Or, well, not maybe not different, but something that kind of builds up. So remember that we talk a lot about the fact that where we come from, politics is not about rights and lefts, but here it's very much about right and left. And Keir Starmer, even though, so Labour is traditionally the party of the left, while the Conservatives are traditionally the party of the right. Yes, there's a fragmentation happening, but that's by the by. Starmer, like Tony Blair before him, is actually somebody who is right of center, but happens to be in the Labour Party. And Angela Rayner is a genuine person from the left. She came up through the unions. Is this leadership tussle that is coming, this deputy leadership tussle that is coming, going to be an opportunity for the left to reassert itself? Because the left of the Labour Party has been bleeding people to Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. So is this an opportunity? And then you have this curveball that was thrown recently with the Greens, and what's his name?
Zach Polanski.
Zach Polanski, who just came up. So is this going to be an opportunity for the left of the Labour Party to consolidate itself, or risk the Labour Party actually finally crossing the boundary and becoming a right-wing party? What do you think?
I'll answer you after the break.
Okay. You want to gather yourself to think, Abby?
Welcome back to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And my name is Cheta. And before we went on break, I asked Ndukwe a question, and he tried to dodge. So let us remind him.
I didn't try to dodge. I was looking at the time, and our producers are there saying, "Look, you need to go on a break." So yeah, carry on. Remind the listeners. Remind me.
No, you said that. You said I don't need to remind you. Yeah, go on. Answer now.
Yeah. So you asked a very good question. And my analysis, for whatever it's worth, is that it's going to be difficult for the left to mount a comeback, to put up a strong candidate. Because if you remember what has happened in recent times, where for the sin of disagreeing with the party with the party on certain bills or even an amendment in the Commons, MPs were suspended from the party. And so what a lot of people have will allege that there is a gradual purging of the left from the center of power in the party. And this is going to see even that happen more, because Angela Rayner was elected right about the time Keir Starmer was elected as leader. She was elected as deputy leader. So there wasn't much consolidation by what is being called the right of the Labour Party. However, now you have members of parliament who owe their ascension, as it were, to their current seats, to the right of the party. If you need 80 MPs, easy. You probably have 3-4 right wing members of the party, able to get that on a whim. I don't know that you'll be able to get that from the left, and that is just one obstacle. Then you also need the labor local branches to support you again at a time where we're seeing uh, branch structures being upended. People, there's been a story, I don't remember which council now, where people have been deselected and replaced allegedly by people who are more in tune with the right of the party. So you see things like this. There's going to be a lot of pressure on these members to select candidates that they see that are more in the good books, as it were, in quotes, of the leadership. The only part where there might be some pushback is because you need union support as well. So that is the only part where the left has. So two parts: one, union support, and two, the members' votes.
But one of the major unions, is it Unite or RNT, has dissociated itself from the Labour Party. I think I saw that in news a couple of weeks ago.
Well, unites more. They cancelled the membership of Angela Rayner over her stance on the issue in Birmingham, where
Okay.
the union is on strike there. The waste, and there's a problem with the council being able to properly collect its waste, and
Has that
because
problem been resolved?
no, I don't think it's been resolved. It's still, sadly, it's still going on,
Okay,
and
so I hear you on your explanations, but do you think that it's possible that the Labour Party, um, as an institution right now, is not looking is spending too much time looking at the noisemakers, as it were, in reform, and not taking enough time to look at what is happening in the party, and as a result, risk losing its membership? Because
oh,
the reason I ask this is
mm,
this. Just before we started recording, I was watching a petition debates in Parliament, and it's about the whole indefinite leave to remain, the proposal to make it 10 years, and there's some cases to make it retroactive. And I was very surprised to see that everybody who spoke, at least for the 1.5 hours that I watched before I got up, everybody who spoke was against it, and their positions were, for a start, influenced by letters that they got from not their immigrant constituents, but full British constituents. So it made me wonder, because I know that one of the things that informed the decision to try to change the whole time to ILR and all of that was trying to pander to the right. But if the people who are actually politically engaged, not the people who are noisemakers, because I think one of the things that has become an issue in the social media age, from where I stand, is the fact that there's always a tendency to look at noise making on social media, um, and then mistake it for something that is real. There's always that tendency. It appears that the really politically engaged people are, maybe it's a step too far to say pro-immigration, but at least they are not virulently anti-immigration. Or am I misreading it?
no, no. So you see, that's quite interesting, and I'll sort of like start from the back and come forward. I've seen some some people have sent me, even now as we're recording this. I've just received a message about, oh, we're not being treated fairly. What's going on? And but you hit the nail on the head when you said that a lot of MPs were against this because of the letters they've received from their constituents. Sadly, it happens to be their British constituents rather than their constituents from migrant backgrounds. And this
I
is
wouldn't say sadly, actually.
no, but this is why I'll say sadly.
Okay.
This is something I have always said to people when I meet them, when I chat with them, and I say the thing about this system is that conversations go a long way. if something is being done to you or about you or around you, and you don't let especially your members of parliament know who have who have the duty to raise these issues on your behalf, they will not know that this i- that you're being affected by it. On a local level, for instance, I remember sitting down in a labor group meeting, and I raised the issue of how foreign students were being treated by landlords and how we needed to do something about it. And people were looking at me like I was speaking something they had never heard before because they were shocked that this was happening. But the thing is, without they, on one hand, they don't have that lived experience, and on the other hand, they don't have someone who will come to them and say these are the issues. So they are living in ignorance. Let's put it that way. That's on one hand. But as a member of parliament, you rely, apart from what the government's priorities are, you also rely on the pressures from your constituency to form your decisions around debates. And if a chunk of the people who are going to be affected by certain decisions are not making their voices heard, then your member of parliament can be forgiven for not raising it on your behalf. So that
Well, fair enough. I think that's one of the objectives why we started this weekly discussion,
yeah.
because you have to forgive a lot of our people from our own background. We come from a community, from a culture that is not politically engaged,
Mm.
generally. So, the real risk is that people carry that mindset across the ocean.
Mm. Yeah, but so again, I'll give you an example. In fact, on the reason this podcast is called the Black Paper, and interestingly, it was because the week we
Of the white
started.
paper that they're
y-
discussing now.
Yes, the white paper. So we said, okay, well, this is our own take on this, and then of course, not just that immigration policy, but just on how government policies and the news affect our communities. I shouted myself hoarse, saying to people, please write to your MPs. Now, it was interesting that in the same forum where I kept saying, please write to your MPs, people were not engaging, but people were sharing links to online petitions, to say, have these, that. Now, these petitions, when I understand that, yes, once they get to a certain number of signatories, they will trigger a process where they may be discussed in parliament. However, this comes from all over the UK. I might even come from outside the UK. On the flip side, if your member of parliament, as we have, so we're in Derby, so we have Derby North, we have Derby South, we have a large concentration of people from African heritage backgrounds in both constituencies. If a lot of them were to write to their MPs to say, this is how this policy affects me, then the MP of Derby North, the MP of Derby South suddenly realized that, hang on, a large chunk of my voting base is not happy with this. I need to talk about it. Or at least I need to have a surgery where we sit down but when we sit back and all we're doing is sharing links to petitions, we don't put that pressure. So, and I'm sure you can hear, how passionate I am about this and how upset I am, but it's upsetting when we all see something that affects us, but we are more interested in in just venting our anger than taking action, or taking action that has been well thought through and is systematic and has been proven time and again to move the needle. So that's answering the second part of your question. Now, the first part of your question about whether Labour risks losing votes, especially from our communities, to see Jack Polanski's Green and the rest. It's a fact. In fact, I remember uh, having something of a heated conversation. Well, I won't say heated. No, it wasn't. It wasn't heated at all. No, that would be unfair. But having an intense, let me put it here, an intense conversation with some people at the last general election who already were saying, "Look, we're going to vote Green." So it was, I was saying to them, "Well, hang on, what does that say about me? Are you saying I've not done well enough to represent you if you're then going to look at all the momentum we've gathered and everything, and then you're going to give it to a different party?" However, that argument is now hard to make if we're seeing the Labour government or Labour members of parliament start to sound like they're taking marching orders from the talking points of reform. And then in comes Zach Polanski, who is making uh, an eloquent defense of why the UK needs migrants and how a different set of the population should be charged, or rather should have to cough up the taxes that they're all paying rather than blame the woes of the country on migrants. That is definitely going to swing a lot of voters, a lot of people from this community. So if the more Labour sounds like it's taking marching orders from Farage's talking points, the more it pushes people who, as we have said now, may find it either difficult or just may not just want to engage through writing to their MPs or others, but who may be desperate enough to say, you know what, let us vote for our lives here. And the Green then present a viable alternative. There's definitely going to be a shift.
Noted. But I think one of the things that we can do on addressing our producers now is in the show notes, we can probably put basically the step-by-step guide of how to find out your member of parliament and then write to them. Um, I think many of them will respond.
And again, to dial back on my passionate talk a lot, before, this is not to say that I know people who wrote to their members of parliament. I know people who not only wrote to them but also took them up for not responding, and they did respond. So yes, these things work. However, the numbers, it's an interesting thing. So going back to Nigeria again, when people want to do magic with election results.
Yeah, the one that's always harassing me when I go back to Nigeria.
Oh, yeah, no, but I want to use this as an example. When
Okay.
people want to mess around with election results, they make sure that the numbers add up. And that is because in politics, no matter, even when you're pretending to have an election or when you can just have someone declare you still realize that numbers matter. So what I'm saying, bringing it back here is MPs will MPs will mostly feel that pinch if you start writing to them, if you show them that there are a lot of people who are affected one way or the other by this policy. And I will say it again as a politician. We may not know how to solve for gravity. We may not know physics or whatever, but what we know is basic maths. We know instinctively addition and subtraction. So that means if I'm an MP and I get 100 letters from people in my
instinctively how to share
constituency.
the money.
No, we don't share money here. But if I get 100 letters.
No, wait. You don't share money here? Have you ever heard of the personal equipment scandal?
Well, there are a few people who have been naughty, let's put it that way. But this is not a Ghana must go democracy.
Yes, they have neater ways of distributing the Ghana must goes.
Well, it is yours to allege and to prove.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, so numbers matter. I'm sure people who talk to me every day are tired of hearing me say it. However, the fact is the fact. Numbers matter. And so I think as you said, Cheta, the producers will have to put this in the show notes, how to contact your MP. What you do with that information is, at the end of the day, still up to you.
Precisely.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting turn of events where Cheta didn't gloat as much as I thought he was going to. So something tells me that, Cheta, you too like Angela Rayner.
So let me use an analogy to describe the way I feel towards people like Angela Rayner. In football, most people, when people say Lionel Messi versus Cristiano Ronaldo, a vast majority of people prefer Messi to Ronaldo. But I always preferred Ronaldo. Now, don't get me wrong, Ronaldo is ridiculously talented, like Lionel Messi. You don't get to where he is without being talented. But Messi is a lot more obviously talented. And as a result, Ronaldo, Cristiano brings a lot of work ethic, a lot to getting to where he is. And that for me is something I like to use as an example to my children. So I'm always when I see someone who has risen to a very good place, worked very hard to get there against a lot of odds, I'm always very sympathetic to the person. Always. So that is the reason why, um, I mean, the moment the news broke, the day I first saw the article on Telegraph about Angela Rayner, stamp duty and all of that, I was like, oh, it really hits me. Now, here's the thing. Nigel Farage, your favorite guy, is currently having a very similar
It's even
scenario.
Cheta is even worse. His
Okay,
scenario is
good. So you,
worse.
you know about it. Now, I think at the risk of
But please,
sounding
let's view, let me, what you would always ask, it's fair you do that, what's the Nigel Farage situation?
Nigel Farage apparently bought a house in Clacton. It appears that it's higher priced than it should be, and it also appears that he gave his partner, his French partner, I think is important to add. He gave his partner the money to buy it. So it brings a lot of questions about where did he get that money?
And to buy it cash,
Yes, cash,
not
full, as in
mortgage.
not mortgage,
So,
full cash down.
he buys this thing, not the money. He initially started with saying, I bought a house in Clacton because, newsflash to anyone who doesn't know, Nigel Farage,
He's
although he
the
was
MP
elected
for Clacton.
yeah, he elected to represent Clacton. It's never there, doesn't represent, he's rather faffing around in the
For
US.
exactly, for
Yeah.
example, during the last PMQs on Wednesday, he was in the US, not
He was in the US
no,
promoting, not just, oh my goodness, that man, but trying to convince the Americans to sanction his country. Now, if there was treason,
yes,
if that is treason on its own, but then he goes there, he's wearing a lapel pin
GB News
of
laptop.
GB News. So it's not even, it's and then of course the show, GB News was about to open a show in the UK, and then he's also at the same time trying to promote gold. So he's just, I mean, so if you're
He's
thinking
using
of,
it to make money. So
he's making
Nigel
money.
Farage is see Farage, and I think it's clear to people like us who are of African heritage because we've seen their type so many times. Nigel Farage is just somebody who is interested in getting wealthy, but
He's a grifter.
somehow along the line it looks like suddenly he can, to use that Nigerian expression, he can wumble and fumble his way into number 10.
It's almost like, what, remember when Trump said that he can shoot someone in the middle of Times Square and nothing will happen? It's
Yes.
almost the same thing with, because when you point out, and there's been conversations on Twitter, people saying, well, yeah, Angela Rayner has resigned, yes, good, but how does this man, who first of all said he bought a house, then said, oh, no, sorry, no, I didn't buy it, we bought it. Oh, no, okay, sorry, we didn't buy it, she bought it. But then you suddenly realize that the money was funneled through his company to her to purchase a house, cash, no mortgage.
Forgive me for being rather salacious. This is his third partner. Has any? I'm not sure anybody has made a lot of noise about the fact that none of his partners has ever been British.
So for a man who talks about taking back England for the English, or Britain for the British, one, he only seems to date foreign women. Two, when he gets a chance, he tries to either make the UK subservient to Putin or to Trump. So he's a grifter. If ever there was one, if you're looking for what in Nigeria we would call a job man, if we're looking for a job man,
That's the word, job man.
Job man, that is Nigel.
The authentic job man.
Authentic. And see, some people will say, don't hate the player, hate the game. If anyone ever represented that,
The thing is that this one rewrites
him.
the rules of the game.
Ah.
He doesn't play according to the rules of the game. So he's hush puppy.
And if that's the case, let us hope that he gets an apartment very close to Hush Puppy as well.
Well, that is not going to happen. Not in the current climate.
But anyway, how you've managed to drag this down to Farage, I don't know. But
Why do I always get the blame?
yeah, look, man, because you
Yeah?
brought him up. This for once, I didn't mention anything about that man until you did.
So disappointing.
And I didn't mention the other person as well.
No. That's done. That's done.
Yeah.
Should be the party conference is starting this September into October. I
Nah,
suspect that after October there will be a leadership challenge in that party.
No, it doesn't make sense. I believe they'll have a leadership challenge in May after the local elections, after a disastrous outing, because you in things like this, you need someone to hang certain failures around their neck. So
I'm not
right
sure
now,
Robert Jenrick is that patient.
yeah, well, and who knows? Maybe because if he waits till then, he might just change his.
He might lose some of the momentum that he has. And momentum can be everything.
True, especially with Farage saying that there are more former Tories who will be joining Nadine Dorries
That kind of
in
thing.
reform. So if one or two more people jump ship, that's true. There might be leadership challenge sooner rather than later. But anyway, Cheta, it's been an interesting conversation, and
Yeah.
as we always do, I'll ask for your last thoughts.
So if we drag it back to where we came from, I think that the UK is at a political crossroads. I think that and this is me speaking as an expert. I think that the concerns over immigration are slightly overblown. Today's parliamentary debates kind of like give some spine to that. But it doesn't change the fact that your party is hemorrhaging support. The cabinet shuffle following Angela Rayner's departure is intended to restore credibility, but I think that there may be landmines in it. I think that's the trying to restrict immigration, having a more restrictive immigration policy is a strategic mistake. A lot of people at today's parliamentary debate pointed that out. And it's important that the Labour government understands that no matter how far they go on that, they will never please the far right that they're trying to please. And instead they will end up alienating their own base. So back to the new ministerial team, the challenge before them is huge. The key thing that if they were serious that they would try to face is the economy. The UK is in many respects, and I had a conversation about this on a work call the other day. It would appear to me that the UK, if not necessarily in form but in substance, is back in Victorian times, where the rich are getting richer and the poor are increasingly seeing that they have more than money. And that is a problem because that is the kind of thing that can blindside any government. So I think that the coming few months are going to be a very, very critical test for whether Starmer has made the right choice in terms of his new cabinet picks. But he needs to understand that the British public is largely disillusioned.
No, thanks. And I'll say to our listeners, to those for whom we're making this podcast largely, anger without action is meaningless. You must write to your members of parliament. You must let them know how whatever policy that is being considered affects you and your family. Otherwise, hoping, as someone said to me, that because David Lamy is black, maybe things can get better in justice, or hoping that because Shabana Mahmood is of Pakistani defense, things might get better with immigration policy is you're just building castles in the sky. They were elected, and rightly so, to pursue a manifesto um, commitment. And if in that manifesto commitment you were not somehow um, considered because the weight of your numbers have not been felt, then then you must make them feel the weight of those numbers by writing to them, so that the way they uh, fulfill those manifesto commitments can be seen through the lens of the number of people it will affect. So hope is not a strategy. Action works.
How inspirational.
Mm. On that note, Tita, shall we draw the curtain? See you at the next one.
See you next week.
Mm.